Hello and welcome to the EU AI Act podcast, your go-to resource for understanding the European Union's legislation on artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Mark Kelly, and I'll be your guide through this intricate landscape of AI regulations that could shape the future of technology in Europe and beyond. In each episode, we'll delve into the EU AI Act, exploring its purpose, implications, and the roles of those involved. From AI developers to deployers, our mission is to demystify how this groundbreaking regulation impacts everything from high-risk AI systems to everyday applications that influence both the physical and virtual realms. Whether you're a developer, deployer, or simply curious about the future AI, this podcast will equip you with the insights and knowledge needed to navigate the ever-evolving world of AI regulations. Stay tuned as we explore these topics and more, helping you to stay informed and ahead in the rapidly changing field of artificial intelligence. Don't forget to subscribe to the EU AI Act podcast on your favourite streaming platform to never miss an episode. Hello everyone, it's Mark Kelly here. I hope you're doing really well. I'm delighted you can join us on the podcast today. We are very happy to welcome Kai Zenner. Kai is the Head of Office and Digital Policy Advisor for MEP Axel Voss EPP Group in the European Parliament. And we're absolutely delighted to have Kai on the show today. If you've been following any of his activity on LinkedIn or social media, you can see how passionate he is about getting the right message across and informing people and the importance of education about the EU AI Act, among other things. Kai, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Mark, for the invitation.
How did you get into your role and how did that actually progress? Tell me a little about your history, your background, because I don't know, like we both mentioned, we've got kind of young kids. Is it something that when you're in school, you're thinking about, I would like to do this as my career in the future? How did you kind of get into this area? And I kind of look at that fascinating. Was it a strategic area to get in, or did you kind of fall in, or is it a mixture of both? I'd love to know.
Yeah, the latter. So it's really a mixture of a lot of different points. So I'm basically a lawyer and political scientist. Also have studied in Edinburgh and Scotland and so on and so on. And back then I was basically just a typical generalist doing a lot of different topics with the European international law focus. And I made the switch from a German think tank to the European Parliament in 2017. And back then I was already focusing on digital policy. And due to the fact that AI is, as you know, already back then one of the hottest topics, let's say, in the digital policy field. My boss, Axel Voss, and we became more and more interested in this topic and also more and more engaged. We were doing so-called own initiative reports of the European Parliament, it's kind of prep work, and then doing here and there some smaller files on AI, legislative files, and then became involved in the AI Act negotiations. My boss is one of the shadow rapporteurs, so lead parliamentarians. Yeah, and especially since the last step, so when he became one of the lead negotiators, the AI Act became, I would say, the element dominating our private and professional life, because it was really a long run and very, very stressful from time to time.
Yeah, which you could see from afar how all-consuming it was, and I can only imagine what was going on background. And realistically, it becomes a 7-day job in terms of you're thinking about things, responding, and I think people can sometimes underestimate that aspect too. So if we take a little bit of a step back, could you provide an overview of the EU AI Act and its primary objectives? Maybe if you could start that kind of high level and then kind of walk its way through.
Yes. So the AI Act very broadly really wants to establish a third way of, let's say, doing AI. We were looking as the European Union to the United States, which had those huge tech corporations, very good universities, and yeah, a striving, let's say, AI bubble that is really financed by a lot of venture capitalists and so on. Then we have, as a second approach, the more governmental, state-focused and planned approach in China. And the European Union was lacking, or is still lacking behind when it comes to investments and a lot of other things. But the Commission and the Parliament and the member states were thinking, okay, maybe let's concentrate on what is making us strong on the market, which is safety, which is trustworthiness, and so on, and develop a kind of third way to do AI. And the third way of doing AI should be focusing on ecosystem of trust. So basically developing trustworthy AI systems that are safe and so on, and an ecosystem of excellence that in the future is promoting better that all of our different actors that are often working in silos are more working together, developing, again, very good AI systems, world-leading AI systems, and so on. The AI Act, so the law, is part of, or the main element of this ecosystem of trust, so this first element of our AI strategy. And here, I would say what makes the AI Act really special, if you compare it to other pieces of legislations or AI policies around the world, is or are three things. First of all, it's a product safety legislation. So similar to toys or medical devices, or let's say vacuumers, washing machines, it tries to put together a list of minimum criteria that every AI system, or a lot of AI systems at least, should fulfill. And if they fulfill it, they get certifications, CE marks, and so on, and are then being allowed to put on the market. And again, by doing that, you would make sure that those AI systems on the internal European market are safe enough to use as end user or business user. The second point is a risk pyramid. So I was talking about many AI systems, but well, what the AI Act tries to do is to prohibit a very small number of systems that are not at all in line with our European values and constitution, fundamental rights, and so on. Then there's a second bigger category of high-risk AI systems that are so risky that they need to fulfill a bit more obligations. Then there's a third category of, let's say, AI systems that need to fulfill certain disclosure obligations, and all others would be not at all regulated. And the third and final point where the AI Act really differs from other pieces of legislation is a value chain approach, because we in the European Union were thinking AI is similar to a car that is consisting of thousands of different pieces. So for a final commercialized AI system, it's also often the case that many companies work together. And it would be a little bit unfair if only this company that is commercializing the final system needs to be compliant and do everything by itself. We try to bring also the other companies in and at least make sure that there is accelerated information sharing along the value chain, making sure that those downstream companies that are commercializing everything have at least all the information necessary. So this, in a nutshell, is what makes the AI Act special, and in the end, hopefully creates this third way to do AI.
Brilliant. And I like the way you have that kind of clear golden thread, starting from the start to the finish, bringing everybody together rather than just the people at the end who are putting it out there. Tell me about the balance between regulation and innovation and how you've been able to work on that from a consumer protection perspective, particularly within the kind of high risk applications.
So in my first answer, I was now rather positive. Here I can bring a little bit of criticism because I think let's go back to what I said, this ecosystem of excellence, ecosystem of trust. This plan to do a third way on AI is coming from a so-called AI white paper of the European Commission that they presented in 2020. And I would say that there, the balance of promoting innovation and of protecting against certain risks that are caused by AI was quite good. It was, I would say this paper was striking a good balance. The problem is with the AI Act, it's, as I said, just one of those two elements of the AI white paper, the ecosystem of trust, which is basically only focusing on risks, and it's almost nothing in the AI Act that is about promoting innovation, making sure that European companies have everything they need to dive into the field of AI development and so on. This the Commission tried to do via a communication called the Coordinated Plan, but this is not an obligation. And in the end, it led to a very fragmented system of 27 different national AI strategies that are trying to promote innovation. In the AI Act, there is, as I said, the strong focus is on preventing risk or protecting against risk for consumers, for, let's say, also clients of banks, of other things, so the end user. And there is basically just, I would say, 2, 3, 4 articles in the AI Act on regulatory sandbox, on SME and startup promotion, on real-world testing, where there's also talk about how you can help providers, as you said, from high-risk AI systems, for example, to do, on the one hand, safe AI systems, but on the other hand, maybe also competitive ones that you are also able to sell in China, in the United States, outside the European Union. Yeah, but as I said, it's probably not enough and not a lot, which is why currently there's talk that after the European election in June, there is maybe some follow-up, not maybe a complete new law, but maybe a roadmap of how to now focus a little bit more on those second side of the coin when it's about promoting AI.
Tell me a little bit about the challenge of implementation and actually going on that journey to implement this as well, because you mentioned that 27 different nation states, so many different types of perspective. It is not a straightforward process to get this implemented. So how does that play out?
Yes, indeed, this will be a major challenge because in the AI Act, we have, going back to what I said, that it's a product safety piece of legislation, we have a very fragmented governance and enforcement approach where the European Commission / the new AI office, so it's a department in the Commission that is taking care of enforcement, is playing a coordinating role and maybe a more active role when it's about cross-border cases and especially when it's about generative AI. But everything else is in the hands of national competent authorities. And the problem already starts that different member states will assign different players. Some of them will say the data protection authority is responsible to implement the AI Act. Others, like in Germany, are saying that the telco agency is responsible. Others are taking the cybersecurity agency. And this will lead in the end to very different interpretations and also activities, levels of activities from different member states. We saw it already with the GDPR, where, for example, your member state has a very different approach to my member state in Germany. Yours is more, let's say, careful in activities, while mine is very aggressive when it's about interpreting and enforcing. And this, unfortunately, we will very likely see again to some extent in the AI Act. What will help, however, is the more concentration within the European Commission that, as I said, is coordinating more and has more power than compared to the EDPB and the GDPR. So, but we will need to see. Enforcement will be very, very, very tricky.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it a little bit with the June elections. Can you discuss any specific amendments or contributions you've worked on regarding the AI Act, and how do you kind of see this playing out over the next kind of months or so? Because AI is moving so quickly, it's so challenging to try to even go on this journey. But how do you see, or maybe the most important amendments that are worth talking about?
Yes, maybe I will concentrate on one thing, which is foundation models and general purpose AI systems. So basically GPT-4, ChatGPT from OpenAI, and so on and so on. This big hype that is now continuing to happen since November 2022. And because it's such a good example to see how difficult it is to regulate the digital field. When the Commission was drafting the European AI Act in 2018-19, foundation model generative AI was not something people knew about. It was really a niche topic within AI, which was back then still a niche topic. And this is why the Commission didn't have anything on generative AI in the Act. And the European Parliament especially was a player that was based on an early brainstorming, putting it in the text. But it's now, so it was the Article 25 on responsibilities along the value chain, and now the Articles 51 and following on general purpose AI models, how we call it now, which created a big framework of minimum criteria that companies like ChatGPT need to fulfill, and then also of enforcement powers for the Commission, for the AI office, to make sure that those companies that are violating those obligations are warned, are sanctioned, and so on. And that the information flow that I was talking about is happening, and downstream actors are knowing enough about ChatGPT that they are using, for example, as a basis for their more concrete AI system. As I said, we brought it in very late in the whole AI Act, so no one really has a clue if our theoretical construction is working in the practice, and which is why we included in the AI Act, let's say, new legislative tools, which you can summarize as secondary legislation. So there are a lot of delegated acts, implementing acts, guidelines, templates, and so on, and also harmonized standards, code of practice, codes of conduct that are now coming in the next years. And it's also going back to the question before, and should help in the enforcement, because right now the AI Act is really vague. It's not really clear how to fulfill it, but those secondary legislation should then make it more clear, bring more special elements in the whole ecosystem around the AI Act, and also allows us to make at least smaller changes to the AI Act. So if we see, as you said in your question, that something changes in the field of AI, we would have some flexibility to make at least certain changes. We cannot change the whole act, but compared to the GDPR, it will be much more future-proof, this law, because of these new ways of adjusting it.
And when we think of impact, and we think of impact for the technology, kind of global tech companies and startups, kind of outside of Europe, what might that impact bring? Would you think about?
Yeah, well, also that we really need to see. I would say the jury is out. And of course, many also non-European companies are right now very, very insecure because, as I just said, no one really understands the AI Act fully because many things are right now not really clear. So many non-European companies are having or facing a situation where they are saying, okay, look, I want to bring my AI systems on the European market, but yeah, maybe this is quite risky because I could face a large fine or I could face other problems. So I would say their problems are not so different from European companies that are also facing the problem. Maybe large tech corporations from outside Europe have probably a larger target on their back when it's about enforcement and sanctioning. But basically, everyone right now needs to wait until the AI Act is being clarified a little bit more, and only then it becomes clearer how to do it. And maybe as a part of your question, there's a lot of talk about the Brussels effect, so that other regions of the world are maybe copy pasting the AI Act and thinking certain parts might also work well for their jurisdictions. I think this is right now almost impossible to predict because I think many countries outside the European Union are very wise to wait a little bit how the AI Act is playing out, what is working, what is not working. And I think only then, if it's working, if it's positive, the feedback, we will see maybe that other regions in the world are saying, okay, look, now we are taking over that and that part from the AI Act, which then, of course, would be very helpful for European companies because they would not need to adjust to other rules because there is a kind of worldwide harmonized or more harmonized situation.
It's challenging for me to ask you additional questions because it's so fluid, and I understand that too. But how do you see the role of public-private partnerships evolving?
Yeah. Well, here going back to what I said that we created in the AI Act, as you see, I have a lot of points that I find really great and other points I don't find so great. But this point I find extremely good because it's another part of this new ways of doing laws, secondary legislation, etc. pp. All those secondary legislation will only work if there is strong public-private partnership. So the Commission and the national competent authorities, they can only write guidelines on prohibited AI systems if they receive good use cases from, for example, companies, NGOs, universities, and so on. And based on this feedback, they are then able to make more specific and really up-to-date guidelines. So already there, we are really hoping for very, very, very strong partnerships between those two sides. And then we have another at least for the digital field, new mechanism, the regulatory sandboxes that many people know from the finance sector already. And in those regulatory sandboxes, we hope that companies are joining and are together with the enforcement bodies entering a regulatory dialogue and maybe even learning process, and then together. Let's take an example. There is an AI system for the employment sector where there are problems when it comes to data governance and GDPR compliance. In this regulatory sandbox, the authority and this company could then work together to become compliant and find out maybe new best practices. And those best practices could then later on also be shared with other companies. This is our big idea and our big hope that with more cooperation between the public and the private sector, we are maybe finally creating digital laws that are making sense and that are easier to implement.
So if we kind of try to get ahead of it, what are some of the emergent issues that in AI that policymakers should be preparing for now, that if we get ahead of it, we're going to probably make it easier for harmonization and that kind of proactive approach. So I suppose I'm asking you two questions. It's kind of the emergent issues in AI that policymakers should be prepared for now,
Yeah.
and then trying to get that harmonization of AI regulations across different sectors, healthcare, finance, transportation, that you're trying to scale that and future-proof it by building on what you have.
Yeah. Let me maybe start with the second question. So I would say one of the more negative side or the elements of the AI Act is really this horizontal approach that is trying to create one law that is applicable for every use case, for every sector, and so on and so on. I think personally, the United States or the UK have the better approach, because with strong ethical guidelines or AI principles, and then sectorial legislation that differs a little bit, or sectorial activities, you are probably better able to address certain risks, certain opportunities, and so on. But nevertheless, the European Union took now the horizontal approach. And now, as you said, the biggest task will probably to bring together all those different actors from different sectors and make sure that they are creating unified approaches that make sense everywhere. And to give you one example, financial sector. The financial sector is doing AI and financial services now for a long time. And the European Central Bank, EBA, and other agencies are already enforcing in this area. Now the AI office, the National Competence Authorities, the Commission, are coming on top and will enforce AI and financial service based on what is standing in the AI Act. It's completely unclear how those two worlds should work together. There will be a working group from the Commission together with member states that is actually looking into exactly this problem. And there will be also guidelines that are hopefully bringing a little bit light how this overcomplicated system works together. But as I said, this will take time. And this is also why Article 113, where it's all about transition periods, is giving sectorial legislation even a transition period of 3 years. Now to your first part of the question. I think the most urgent points that we need to solve is copyright and data protection, because both points, so privacy and copyright, are blocking often good training of models and of AI systems, of algorithms in Europe. And we saw already a few companies leaving the European Union, doing their training outside, Stability AI from the UK, for example, then coming back. And as in the UK, the GDPR still applies, now they are facing a court case. So how do we allow our companies to do a training that is similar, excellent than the one from OpenAI or from Huawei AI model and so on? This is completely unclear. We have also in Europe still this problem of access to high quality data sets. The Data Act, the Data Governance Act, and the data strategy as a whole is trying to fix it a little bit. But yeah, it's still not applicable. And also here, there are a lot of problems. So I would say huge issue. And then, of course, copyright. We saw it also in the United States with New York Times against OpenAI and so on and so on. It's just really unclear how to strike here a good balance, because I think both sides made a lot of good points. You need copyright protected content if you want to make a good model, a good system, and also if you want to mitigate, for example, discrimination, bias. We need the best available data, and this is often copyright protected. But on the other hand, companies cannot basically just grab everything for free, because yeah, so this copyright protected content was also generated and costed a lot of money. How to solve it, completely unclear, but it's also something the next term so the next legislative term after the European election will probably address a little bit more into detail. And then the third point that we all need to think about, I guess, is really sustainability, Green Deal. There are so many potential synergy effects between protecting our climate and using more technology. But right now, both areas are completely addressed in silos that are in parallel happening. And I think, again, if we would use now, for example, AI for our smart grid, for energy questions, and so on, we could make such a big step. But this is something now policymakers need to do more, that they also need to leave the silos and try to find out where all those interlinks are existing, and are trying to create a more comprehensive approach on AI and on a lot of other things.
Kai, you've kind of answered my 4 questions in those 2, which is very, very helpful, because my next I was going to ask about, how the issues of AI generated content and potential infringement being handled, and then also the adoption regulation in different countries. It's quite interesting to kind of look at the FTC in terms of the US, pretty more of aggressive approach, where they're issuing orders to 5 companies requiring them to provide more information regarding investments. So these were like Alphabet, Amazon, Anthropic, for example. And kind of the FTC chair, Lena McCann, seems to be kind of going after this and kind of looking to get answers very quickly. And where I think in Europe we're still trying to figure that out and trying to think who's playing by the rules, who's not. Where in the US they want to kind of get enforced, even though they don't necessarily have that kind of regulation like the EU Act that's been there. In one way, they're talking about regulation. In the other ways, they're kind of saying, well, we want to make sure there's a delicate dance between the both of them. But then they've got the FTC that's going after it. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic if you're looking from afar in terms of who's actually got the regulation and who doesn't, and which is more innovative in terms of driving innovation and less regulation in terms of stifling it. However, actions seem to be more legal coming from the US rather than Europe at this moment in time. I don't know if you've got a potential thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's super fascinating. And especially since now the United States, well, here in Europe, many people are still saying, yeah, they don't really have something legislative and so on and so on. But again, I would now argue they have a kind of comprehensive AI policy with those AI bills, or the AI bills of rights, and then very, very clear tasks for their sectorial agencies to implement certain new strategies, to make sure that certain things are playing out. And also in a lot of other countries, we have now different approaches, codes of conduct in Singapore, the automated decision-making law in China, AIDA in Canada, which is closer to the European Union. So I think we will see now a little bit, not a battle, but a competition between regulators and AI policies. And let's say the best case scenario, and this is now going closer to the examples that you were giving, is that we are helping each other and that we are trying to build up best practices. And if, for example, Khan is now seeing certain things she likes in Europe, that she is then basically trying to take over at least certain approaches she can also, as an executive actor, use without having now something like the AI Act applicable already in the US. And maybe at the same time, the European Union can also take over certain things that are working quite well from the United States. And one example is the United States, the NIST agency, is working, as you probably know, on a new risk management framework that is based on the OECD risk management framework. And to what I hear is that the European Commission is looking very, very closely what they are doing there and find it very interesting because actually it's not that far away from our Article 9, the risk assessment in the AI Act. And this, again, I think we will see in the best case scenario in the future that there is a lot of cooperation, even though we have all very different approaches. But nevertheless, since the general principles behind all those different AI approaches are rather similar. It's always about transparency, human oversight, trustworthiness, and so on. I think there is a lot of room for cooperation. So I'm rather positive.
Kai Zenner, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. You've been listening to Kai Zenner, Head of Office and Digital Policy Advisor for MEP Axel Voss EPP Group in the European Parliament, and we've been discussing the EU AI Act, its primary objectives, the importance of balancing innovation with consumer protection, some of the challenges to implementation of the EU AI Act, and we also talked about specific amendments or contributions that we might see in the future, the impact potentially of global tech companies, and also the importance of public-private partnerships as well. And we finalized and talked about some of the important areas about copyright and harmonization. Kai, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
If you're as passionate about the intersection of AI and regulation as we are, then you'll want to dive deeper. That's why I'm excited to introduce the EU AI Act online course. This comprehensive course is designed to arm you with a thorough understanding of the EU AI Act and its implications across industries. Whether you're an attorney, a compliance officer, a developer, an executive, or a regulator, this course is everything you need to navigate the complexities of AI regulations. Over 3 hours of on-demand video and 6 detailed articles await, all accessible forever on any device, be it your phone, tablet, or TV. Enroll today to secure unlimited access and take the first steps towards mastering the intricacies of AI regulation. Just visit courses-ai.com to get started and stay ahead of the curve and understand the impact and lead with confidence in the age of AI. Don't miss out, your deep dive into the EU AI Act starts here.